Hi, this is Anis from Never Stop Trucking. Today we are talking about brokers. Are freight brokers dispatchers' enemies? This question has been bothering me a lot lately because I see people complaining about freight brokers, but then it's almost impossible to book a load without a freight broker unless you have some kind of dedicated runs or contracts directly with shippers. Most of smaller companies are in the spot market, and therefore that means they have to work with freight brokers. If the freight brokers are enemies of dispatchers, well, how come we need each other and how come we have to work together? Let's find out in this video. What is a freight broker? A freight broker is an entity that's allowed to work directly with shippers and with carriers, serving as a middleman. They have their own authority granted by FMCSA. They have their own MC number, and that's their official title. Sometimes you have an option to be a freight forwarder, but a freight broker is more common. In order to get some decent freight, carriers usually have to work with brokers because shippers will want to work with someone that has a lot of capacity and a lot of trucks at their possession, and freight brokers just do that. They work with thousands of carriers. If you're a small carrier and you have, let's say, 5 or 10 trucks, you probably cannot meet a demand from a large shipper, and therefore they will not want to choose to work with you. They want to work with someone that has access to thousands of trucks at any time of the day or an hour, and they can come up immediately with a truck. Unlike the carriers, because they only have so many trucks, and usually their trucks are not in that area when the shippers need them. Unless you can prearrange that freight, then you're out of luck. You have to go with a freight broker, all right? So what is the problem with freight brokers? Before we continue, let's take a quick look at Load Connect and how it can help you with booking loads. If you watched any of my videos, you know I don't recommend anything unless I believe in it, and Load Connect is one of a few such products. I genuinely think this Chrome extension will change the way you work and book loads. Are you frustrated when you're not able to call a broker and inquire about a load because they want you to email them? Well, I was too until recently, but now those are my favorite loads to work with. Load Connect lets you email brokers with one click of a button, and that's it. It will include your name and your company info that you can customize and load information. Instead of copying and pasting email addresses, typing in the load info into the subject and body and switching back and forth between tabs and windows, all this is now done in a fraction of a second. This way you can find out more about these loads even if you're doing something else, like being on the phone, eating, or watching my videos on YouTube. Load Connect is packed with other features as well, such as being able to see the load rate per mile or get the load routing info from Google Maps directly from the DAT board. Load Connect also works with other load boards as well. Get 50 first emails free and get 10% off any subscription plan as a Never Stop Trucking subscriber. Trucking carriers, especially the smaller ones, claim that they can easily work directly with shippers, and this way they can take out the middleman, and this way they can potentially make more money. Now, in this case, both a carrier and a shipper would be able to save on money because they can cut out that middleman, and that's the argument that a lot of carriers have these days. And there's a conception that brokers will take a large cut of money from that amount, so that way that money could have easily went directly to carriers instead of brokers, who in carriers' eyes don't do much. Now, is that true? Well, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. See, in good market times, when shippers and brokers' customers are paying large sums of money in order to transport freight from point A to point B, then yes, it is possible for brokers to make a lot of money. But in market times like we have right now, where everyone is trying to get the last dollar out of the shipper, brokers are not doing that well either, all right? So in this case, brokers are suffering as well. So it's kind of hit or miss. It depends on what kind of market times we have. It depends on what kind of contractors brokers will have with these shippers, and it also depends on regional freight, seasonal freight, and a lot of other factors. So yes, you could argue that brokers are unnecessary. If you want to work with large DCs, with large shippers, then it's practically impossible for a smaller carrier to get into that freight unless you are a broker. Now, therefore, some trucking companies are deciding to form their own trucking brokerage, and they can be very successful with that. In this case, they can put their freight on their trucks, and if they cannot cover that freight with their trucks, they can easily broker out that load. And this way, they have a lot of other options. But if you're strictly a broker or a carrier, then the tables turn around every few years. Sometimes brokers have the upper hand, sometimes carriers have the upper hand. But big thing that we all forget, no matter if you're a broker, no matter if you're a carrier and what kind of opinion you have, is that the shippers are ultimately the biggest players out there, and they have the biggest sayings because the load prices start with them. They're constantly watching the markets, and no matter whether you are profitable as a carrier or as a broker, they will have their own rates, and you can't make them change their mind. It doesn't matter what your expenses are, and if it makes sense for you to run a load at $1.50 a mile or $2 a mile for shippers, this doesn't matter. All they see is their profits, and this is how they're going to present it to you. No matter if you're a carrier or a broker, I explained in one of my past videos that if you're a shipper and you're working with a broker, you give them the rate that you think is reasonable, and that you think you can cover that load for. If a carrier contacts a shipper and they offer them their services, they will most likely go even less on their rate because they know that brokers will take a cut of that pay. So if they pay a broker $1,000 for a load, they will not give you $1,000. They will most likely give you less than that because ultimately they want to save the money. They don't really care who covers that load as long as they have someone that's there on time and that can safely transport that load. They are looking at every cent, not just every dollar. They're looking at every cent. So usually in times like these, even brokers have their hands tied down because the shippers are the ones deciding on those rates. So if we as carriers and the brokers can work together to present to the shippers and everyone else out there that needs their freight shipped how the prices that they have are hurting everyone, and that this is not going to be okay to do for a great while because eventually we have to go back to the old rates because of the fuel prices and the inflation and insurance prices. If we can explain that to them together, then hopefully everyone can make some money in this industry. There is another question here. Are there any upsides of you as a carrier working with the brokers? I think there are upsides there, not just downsides. The upside is that you can easily communicate with someone. If you're working directly with a shipper, it's usually harder to get someone in their shipping or accounting, in any of those departments, especially when you need help right away. They are slow to answer. Sometimes it will take them hours or days to answer. Having a broker that's in possession of that load and that you can usually reach 24/7, and usually you can get someone on the line or through email quickly, that helps a lot when communicating. So that's one thing. Another thing is that brokers are specializing in this kind of industry as opposed to warehouses, DCs, or factories. They don't know much about transporting. They don't know much about laws, about FMCSA rules, whereas brokers can work with you with planning the load and coming up with solutions if there are any issues during the transport. The brokers are more knowledgeable about these things as opposed to shippers, so they can help you faster and quicker with any of these issues, including appointments, overages, shortages, damages, or potential claims on these loads. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not rooting for brokers. I'm just trying to look at the situation from both sides. No matter whether we like it or not, we have to work together. So there is no going around that. If you're a carrier and you have dedicated freight, good for you. I would love to do that. But if you're small like me, if you only have few trucks, then most likely you will have to work with brokers using load boards. Hopefully this video was helpful to you in explaining why we need brokers. And if you have any questions or comments, I know this is a hot topic and a lot of you will not agree with me. Let me know in the comments and tell us about your experiences, whether you're a broker or a carrier.